Okay, guys, so this is the second short session on costings. So we've looked at family costings, which included or component costings, which looked at obviously the doors, windows, furniture, that kind of stuff, which is a simpler method of costing. Now we're going to look at what's called as how to cost out system families. When I talk about system families, I refer to obviously just the walls, the door, the walls, the roofs, the floors, that kind of thing. So when we compare that to obviously the component families, where we, if I go back to our previous costing, where we did with the doors, we look at that. What we did there was really add in the total amount of units that we had of that particular family, multiplied by the cost, and added them up. Okay, so it's a very simple calculation of doing that. Okay, but if we look at a house, our house again, if you look at a wall, for example, so we've got this wall here, and then we can't do the same method for walls and floors and roofs because this wall will cost different to this wall, which will cost different to perhaps this wall. Okay, so we can't just multiply each a unit figure to every wall. Okay, in order to do this new type of calculation, we need a couple of things. We need to either calculate via the materials within the wall, or identify the finished cost of a wall and multiply that by the area of wall. So you can either have the complete specification of a wall and know how much it costs to build that wall per meter squared, or per meter. In which case you can multiply the amount of area of a wall or within your building by that unit. Okay, so you've got to generate your own units, and typically with walls, it's either unit per meter squared rate that's applied to the construction of walls, roofs, or floors at basic level. I will show you in the next tutorial how you do the material takeoffs, which is again slightly more complicated. If you don't have the overall cost of a wall per meter squared as constructed. Okay, so like before, we need to create a schedule and then work from there and build up our schedule. So if I go to view, schedules, and schedule and quantities. So this time we're going to create a wall schedule. So if you go down to walls, walls, and then yeah, you can change your name as well, but same process. There's nothing changed there other than if you want to change the names. So once you're here, the parameters we want is obviously the same as last time. We want to know what type of wall we're going to be costing out, so you need to go to the family and type. So type and family, which is family and type, sorry, and then move that across. We also want to know the cost. Move that across. We also need two additional parameters to be added in. We need the area, and with that we also need to know the total cost. Okay, so why that's important is because the cost here will only amount for one area unit, so 1 meter squared of that family type. We need to understand or get the cost for the cost multiplied by the areas, and the areas obviously is unknown just now. It's going to work out the areas and then apply the costing to that area. So we need to work out the total cost of that wall type based on the unit cost for that wall. So to do that, we need to create you won't see it, it's not on the actual available fields. We need to create a custom field. So to do that, we need to add a calculate parameter. You click on the button there. We can name this total cost. In terms of type, it's currency because we're dealing in pounds. The formula here, if you click on the three little dots there, will be cost, and then space multiplied, which is the asterisk, space by the area. And to equalize any of the units within the calculation, we need to divide that by 1 meter squared. So to do that, 1 m to the power of 2. So on my keyboard it's shift 6. It might be different on your keyboard. And the power of 2. And click OK. And that gives you total wall costs. Okay, if we click OK on that, it'll create a schedule there. So if I go extend that, so that's create a schedule of all of my internal and external walls that I have in my model. Okay. Okay, so now that we've got a schedule created, if we go back to the 3D, we can start to kind of put together a costing for the walls themselves. Now in this model, up till now we've only just used concept information within the model. Obviously, you may have all the properties attached to it with all the materials and layers attached to it. In this instance, it's just a concept. It's just one mass of a wall. But even within that, if we go into edit type, if we assume this wall is, for example, a rendered blockwork wall with some insulation inside of it and a lightweight steel weight frame for the internal partitions or internal framing and a plasterboard finish, if we assume that's what we're pricing against, if you go down again, similar to the other method that I've shown you before, identity data, you can actually go in and put the cost of the overall construction built cost per meter squared for that wall type. So if you know what that wall cost as a complete wall type per meter squared to construct, you can add this cost in. So for example, that type of build wall type might cost around, for example, £265 based on figures I found in some other projects. So that wall constructed with those layers attached to it as a built construction cost is £265 per meter squared. There is, as I said, there's a more detailed material takeoff, which we'll look at in the third session, that actually divides the cost per material, so slightly more detailed way of calculating it. So once we've done that, if I go to OK, so that's saying that external 300 wall is going to be and is going to be £265 per meter squared. So apply, click OK. Now if we go back into our schedule, so if we go back into schedule and if we go to wall schedule, you'll now see we're starting to populate the schedule. So for each wall type, so not each wall type, so each wall component. So these are all the 4 external walls. So it's not grouped them yet. So these are all each of the 4 external walls that we have in the model, and each of those costs £265 per meter squared. That's the area of the wall, and it gives you a total cost for that wall for each of those external walls, based on those 2 figures. Now we can do the same as we did in the other method, where we can actually use a spreadsheet to calculate other wall types and put in the information here rather than go through the process that we just did by manually doing it. So in here, for example, if we say an internal wall with plasterboard either side and framing costs £55 per meter squared to construct that, click enter, and that will say, do you want to change all the internal concept 100 walls in that family? Click OK, because all of them are the same, and that will change now all of them. That's all the internal wall areas, and again we will get some total costs per wall within that model. So this is actually working out each of those walls. So that wall is worked out. That wall is worked out in the schedule. So it's not separated each of the walls out, and yet we're going to do that in the next step, which is to kind of organize that schedule to kind of summarize the different parts a bit more to make it a bit more easy to read. So next step, what we're going to do is kind of simplify and make this more presentable and more readable, and just to kind of separate out the information so it's more legible, to kind of generate the right totals, and to kind of separate out all the parts of this kind of schedule. This is quite a simple schedule because there's not that much information in it, but you can imagine on a big commercial project, this would be quite, it could get quite long, this list, and the information within it could get quite confusing. So to kind of understand how the sorting and grouping works, or how powerful that is to help you organize information, is quite important as well. So you can actually start to piece together information in a bit more simpler way for your understanding, as well as on communicating it to others as well. So if you click on sorting and grouping, click edit, So what we want to do is obviously click grand totals. So that's obviously always on. But then we're going to go and sort by family and types because we want the external walls and internal walls to be separated. Okay, so we want the external walls to be calculated separately and internal walls to be calculated separately as well, so that they're put together. We'll click on it. We'll have a header on them so it knows it will kind of label them as they go between each of them, and then on the footer we will add in the totals of each of those components. So it'll total up all the external walls together, and it will total up all the internal walls together to give us a total of each of them. It will also, if you go to formatting, if you go to total cost, total wall cost, we can actually add in calculate totals because it will give us the total cost of the walls as a total as well, of all the walls. So with all that clicked on, if you click on OK, now you'll see now it's sorted all our sheet out. So we've got external wall, whatever that is. Now it's just a 300 mil wall, but as I said, it can be you could specify that to whatever you want it. It could be brick and block, it could be rendered wall and aluminium or steel framing. It's got a cost associated with it. It's got areas, individual areas of each of the walls that's been calculated. But most time, the most important cost is to a client or to your QS will be the total of the external wall. So this is where you compare different wall types to find out the total. So it's got itemized total for the external walls. Similarly, it's got an itemized total for the internal walls, and then obviously it adds up both of them and gives you a total of all the walls in your building. We've only got two different wall types here. We've got internal, we've got external, and then we've got internal. Obviously, if you've got more, this will be added up even more. It will add up different families. So you've got a different family in terms of internal 150. It'll add up all the 150s as a separate thing. So as I say, it's just a simple way of doing it. As most time, this information is taken in to a spreadsheet or another format for presentation purposes, but for calculation purposes, this is quite a good way, quite a quick way of doing it and getting your totals to kind of take into Excel or Word document or table to kind of show a summary of the cost for a client or for someone else to have a look at. And this kind of completes our second tutorial on costing. So this is the next stage of costing for all the different system components. The final one we're going to cover in the next video is going to be about taking material takeoff. So that's a bit more detailed. So that looks at taking individual material costs and gathering them and building a schedule, a much more detailed schedule to understand how much brick, for example, that you need in the building, and calculate the amount of brick, calculate the amount of insulation as a individual component level, wall component level or wall layer level costing.